Hi runners. I know it's been a while since the last video. There's been a lot of things going on, and I kind of hit a creative wall in terms of trying to make content that I wasn't enjoying making, and it deviated so far from what I wanted to do with this channel and talking to you guys about Marathon. It was too deep into other games, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I've gone through probably 5 or 6 different video ideas in this time frame. And then today I was sitting there and I realized I've never talked about Thief and Stealth in their own video. And I feel like this dev update gave us so much information and confirmations for things that I kind of suspected and things that I would assume. Now, that all together, I do want to talk about these characters, and I've had plenty of time to think about them in the last couple of months. So I think it's time for me to tell you what I'm thinking about them. Before we do that, though, I do want to kind of give you a little update on my expectations after watching the Vidoc, not the Vidoc, but the Joe Ziegler video once or twice. I want to give you my updated expectations going into Marathon and what I expect to see out of it. If I wasn't sure before, I'm definitely convinced, we're going for a pure extraction shooter, more of a Tarkov style than Hunt. That it was originally what I thought, but now we're 100% confirmed that's going to be the case. They are going for a focus on the experience of survival. Going off of what Joe said in that video, he wants you to feel like you are surviving in a hostile world, and I can appreciate that. That's kind of one of the things I enjoy about Marathon. One of the things I enjoy about Tarkov is feeling like you are a part of the world. So I'm glad they're going for that. They also mentioned how things that you can loot from the weapons and equipment, as well as consumables like grenades and mines and meds. They did confirm that things that you loot can change your stats or alter your capabilities. Now, he did stutter when he was saying that, and it kind of sounded like he was going to say, give you abilities, and then he said, change what you can do kind of thing. So, if I take 2 and 2 together, my assumption is it's going to be something along the lines of equipping X item will let you use that item to do something in game. The example would be in our preview, we talked about implants and how the implants might give you like night vision or something like that. So something like that's what I'm expecting when he mentioned it in the video. And finally, the last expectation that has now been set is this class-based runner system. Now, I know there's some debate on class-based versus hero-based, etc., etc. And, whatever you want to think about what a class is versus what a hero is, or where your limit is totally up to you. But I think there's a big difference between something like the heroes that we see in Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, and a class-based system like Dark and Darker or Battlefield, etc. They're claiming this is more of a class-based system. Obviously, time will tell. You take everything with a grain of salt here until, it's officially confirmed. But my assumption, and based on the way they talked about it, is that yes, you will have a set of abilities that you can choose from for each of these. It sounded like they would be, maybe customizable and limited. So let's say something like Dark and Darker, where you can have a selection of perks and activatable abilities, and you take a certain amount of them, and those abilities that you have the availability of are based on the class you're currently playing, or in this case, your runner. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation for the last year or so, 2 years, since the Vidoc and the ARG on different runner models. So that is what this seems to be. Now, all that said, I want to start talking about Thief and Stealth. As you can see, we have Thief and Stealth on the screen now. On the left is Stealth, on the right is Thief. And I've spent so long kind of looking at these pictures and trying to dig into them and trying to glean some sort of information off of it. And for a long time, I felt like I was kind of just looking at these and not seeing anything. And then the more I thought about it, the more little details that I kind of picked up. Now, this is working off of, one, a disclaimer. Both of these images could just be promotional images, or maybe they're in-game like trailers or things to, get you hyped for a character. and they have no real bearing on the abilities of these characters. So, that's possible, but we're going to work under the assumption that they picked these art pieces specifically to show off an idea or a premise for these characters, and that they have some bearing on the character's main gimmick or their mode of function. Now, I want to point out some of the obvious and some key points that I've gathered from these images. Namely, we have on the left with stealth, invisibility, smoke. They have a couple different lights going off. Maybe one's turning them invisible, one's coming uninvisible, something like that. Hard to really tell in a picture, right? Whereas Thief is just kind of leading around a corner with a gun and some really thick-looking armor. Off rip, that was kind of all I really saw, and it didn't really tell me much. But the more I've looked into it, the more that I've just picked out these three things that kind of gave me a little more of an idea and a guess at what they could be doing. Obviously, speculation, as I said before. So here's what I'm picking out. 1, both of these characters have glowing eyes. Now, it could be a stylistic choice for the art piece that their eyes glow to make them stand out. They are obviously artificial bodies, robot-esque, correct? So it's totally possible that they're doing that just to show it off for the art. Alternatively, it could be something similar to like a red outline in some games. Like if you played, Overwatch, they outline characters in red so that you have an easy chance to tell who the enemy is when they're on your screen. Kind of makes them stand out. I don't expect we'll see outlines in Marathon just because it's kind of challenging you to find them a bit more as part of the game. However, I could see the eyes being lit up to a degree that you can kind of see them in the darkness as a kind of, when you're getting aimed at by a sniper in some games and you get sniper glint, consider it like sniper glint for the characters. Maybe that's just something I picked up on, and I thought maybe that could be a cool detail. Maybe it's totally made up. The next thing is, obviously they have different weapons on them. Thief has what looks like a PDW. I'm assuming it's a little sight on the front of the gun, a little rectangle with the red lights. Looks like a futuristic, red dot hollow sight maybe. But it looks blocky, looks small, probably high fire rate if I had to guess, right? And then Stealth has obviously a rifle system of some kind. Now, to tell if it's a automatic rifle, a semi-auto rifle, a sniper rifle, anything in between, who really knows? It does look like there is a scope towards their arm. So magnified optic of some kind, most likely. And that kind of, if this is intentional and they are trying to give us hints with these images and try and convey a theme, it gives me the idea that Thief is more of a close range ambushy character, and Stealth is more of a mid-range skirmisher, right? If you're using a rifle, you're not getting in too close. Now, you might think, oh, they have invisibility, why would they not get in close? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But just looking at the image, even where they are invisible, you can kind of see their outline, and with the smoke, it helps you see them a little bit. So potentially, invisibility is a thing that Bungie's done before with hunters in Destiny, and you can still see invisible hunters pretty easily if you are looking for them. Where they get you is when you're distracted. So that might be something that you're playing into with this character as well. Now, the third thing I wanted to point out is just that Stealth looks like they have grenades on their kit, as well as maybe some extra mag cases. They seem to be very, very aggressive. Obviously, they have stealth as a capability and smoke, but apart from that, they seem to just have a powerful weapon, some utility in terms of grenades and pushing people out, and that seems to be about it. From what I can tell, obviously they're on the high ground, so there is that, but that seems to be their main thing. Whereas Thief has this visor on her head, and for the longest time I was thinking maybe that's just a stylistic choice to have that there, but alternatively it could really be a gear piece or an ability passive thing, and in that case it could be something like, I wouldn't want to say wall hacks, but maybe it could highlight loot items, so things with lots of valuable items inside of them. Maybe it could highlight players with certain types of gear on them. You never know. I think that one's a little bit out there, but maybe highlighting highlighting loot items from a distance so that you can see them in the darkness kind of thing. That could be pretty cool. That's like a pretty thief thing to have, I would say. They seem like a very big techie, in my opinion. And the way that I've kind of looked at these characters and kind of categorized them on my own end, Thief is more of a techie to me, and Stealth is more of an assassin type. That could be totally wrong, but hear me out. These characters are very similar thematically in that Thief and Stealth are both quote-unquote stealth types, right? If you were to go into any RPG or other game, you could see Stealth and Thief in the same category. And I think they did that intentionally and then showed us these pictures to show that they are working on multiple characters in the same archetype, but to have different niches. And when I say that, I mean they're two sides of the same coin. Now, again, we're going into speculation here, but when I look at these two, I see two stealth characters, but I see them approaching it in different ways. One of them is focused on invisibility and smoke, which is kind of disruptive and more effective at a medium range. Whereas Thief is in close, in quarters, playing around corners. Hypothetically, we could be seeing something like a dichotomy between sound and vision. Obviously, Stealth would be the vision stealth character who uses invis and smoke to break line of sight. And when you look at Thief, maybe you don't see a quiet character. They do have this really bulky armor and gear on, and the more I look at it, the more odd it seems at how bulky their gear is compared to Stealth. And the more I've looked at it, the more I've wondered if maybe all of this bulk is sound dampening items or container space for utility things. Because when you think about a thief, you think people you never hear, and you think a bag full of tools, right? So potentially, thief might not, get invisibility and smoke to break line of sight, but they might have quieter footsteps, faster crouching, something like that gets them in and around you in a way that stealth can't if they're invisible but stomping around really loudly. And this kind of also puts them at odds in terms of their offensive versus utilitarian nature that I'm kind of giving them. If you look at Stealth, they seem like a very aggro character. You want to pop in Viz from a distance, get a line of sight, and take the first shot is your main goal. And Thief, you're probably also going for the first shot, but she seems more like she's going to want to set up an advantage for herself in her own way. Things like that might be, using flares or flashes or something like that to initiate instead of just taking the first shot off rip. Alternatively, she could just be more defensive. So something that's like playing as a solo, you might find it to be more useful that nobody hears you versus nobody seeing you. Because even if you're not seen, if people hear you running around the corner, they're going to be ready for you. Similarly, if you're invisible but you still make a lot of noise, it's still pretty simple to pick out where you are. On the other hand, if nobody can hear you coming, you can see a lot less than you can hear in most games. Because your hearing is always 360 degrees, and typically you'll hear through some walls, but your vision doesn't do that. So it might be this low skill floor versus high skill floor character setup, where stealth is easier to use, easier to get value out of early game, pub stomper character, because invis is generally more immediately useful than something like stealth. Than something like thief, where if you had quieter footsteps and things like that, if you run out in the middle of the open, then obviously people are going to see you and shoot you. But if you play it more tactfully and you're playing around these corners and in close quarters, then having quiet footsteps is probably more valuable than cloaking. Now, we also kind of, if these are assumed to be true, give them their own little niches in terms of, I would consider something like stealth to be a flanking character and thief to be a lurking character. If you don't know the difference between those, haven't played enough CS and Valorant-esque games, where a lurker is someone who kind of hangs out in the middle of a map and waits for people to come to them, and the flanker is going all the way around to come up behind them. The lurker is generally closer to where the action is, and the flanker is taking the long routes. And for those long routes, you would probably want invisibility because you're harder to hear, whereas for the short routes, you want the silence because we'll hear you stomping around. So with that, you might have, as a full circle, give stealth mid-range skirmisher flanker role, where they're taking fights from 30, 40 meters with their rifle, using their invisibility to move from into cover and between cover to get new angles on you in the middle of a fight, and smoke to disengage, re-engage at their own opportune angles. Whereas thief might be a more close-range ambusher who's lurking around corners to try and hit you with something high DPS, like an SMG, a shotgun in close quarters, and using their visor to find loot in the dark and fill up their pockets. Essentially, at the end of the day, they both fulfill the same goal of being hard to locate and being stealth characters, but they come at it with vastly different approaches. Now, obviously, I'm making this up, but it's kind of the vibes I'm getting off of them as I've watched them and heard them talk about stealth as the hard to pin down character, quote unquote. And these images have conjured up images of other games and other characters and other classes that have given me this idea of what these characters might do. So if we're going to talk about stealth as a character solo, and then we're going to talk about thief after this, I think the first thing that I get while looking at this image is it evokes the same feeling as I would get from a Night Stalker Hunter in Destiny or Revenant / Wraith in Apex. This kind of smoky invis feel on a rooftop looking down on somebody is this kind of assassin vibe that I've been talking about. At its simplest nature, the skill set of these kind of stealthy invis, avoiding other people, skirmishing roles is they're typically immediately pub stompers. Playing against someone who can't spot invisibility is an immediate win in these cases, as well as whatever other abilities they have. But basing them off of Night Stalker, Revenant's Wraith, I've sort of come up with the kind of skill set I would imagine a mid-range skirmisher with invis and smoke as a premise might have. The skill set is obviously not complete, and I think I could expand on it in some ways, and it's a little redundant and simple, but I think in the case of something where you are going to have this powerful ability of invisibility, you don't need a lot more to flesh it out, because invisibility, as I said, is just alone a powerful effect. So when I talk about Thief, I'm going to have a lot more to point out, but I think Thief is going to be a harder character to play because they have so many moving parts, right? And none of them will be as immediately valuable as being invisible at any given moment. So if we're going to talk about things that stealth might have as an assassin type character, obviously the first thing that we're going to talk about is invisibility. Now, invisibility is not new to extraction shooters or to Bungie. In Dark and Darker, the rogue class has invisibility as a class action, and they also have the ability to move while invisible with some passive perks, but at its basic, they can turn invisible for a couple of seconds, as well as every character, if they meet certain stat points, can take invisibility potions that turn you invisible for the same effect, and the wizard also has a spell that turns them invisible. So invisibility is kind of plentiful in Dark and Darker, but it is more of a melee, for the most part, kind of game. A little bit chunkier, more, fantasy inspired, so invisibility makes sense. I think invisibility isn't too broken in that game because for the most part, most of the invisibility will not let you move while you're invisible, and taking any action will break invisibility immediately. So you need to have a setup for it if you're not playing with something to allow you to move. However, you are totally invisible in these cases. You don't show any outline or anything like that. So it is a very powerful form of invisibility, so having limitations is good. That said, Bungie's also done their own version of invisibility in Destiny, where the Void subclass now, as a whole, has the ability to turn invisible, and some weapons will let you turn invisible. But originally, it was the Night Stalker thing in Destiny 2, or the Arc Hunter thing in Destiny 1. But Hunters have always been specialists in invisibility. Invisibility in Destiny has never been totally invisible. You can always see an outline of the character if they're on your screen. Sometimes that blends in better with the background than others, but if you're looking for an invisible person, you will find the outline of that invisible person. If you're in the fight with somebody else and you get jumped by an invisible guy because you couldn't see the outline because you were fighting someone, that's where the power in invisibility lies. It's in your ability to jump out of, corners and angles people aren't expecting to take advantage of them being off balance. As well as in PvE context, which, Extraction Shooters is going to have PvE. They've mentioned PvE is going to be part of the game. But in PvE, it does make you immune to AI, and I don't imagine the AI in this game being much more aggressive than Destiny AI. I don't think the AI in these games should be crazy powerful, so you should generally have a leg up over them. So I'm totally fine if, being invisible makes you immune to AI, essentially. But in terms of how to incorporate it into this, I think if they have the outline like it looks like they do in this image, it's not going to be that bad. And if they incorporate the eye glow from these images, you could have someone be invisible but have those eyes creeping out at you, and that could give somebody away as being there. But if you're not looking for it, you might miss it, right? If it's out of the corner of your eye, you might hallucinate that. So I think that is a good telltale sign, but also a good way to have somebody always fear that the flash of red they see in the corner of their eye is a person. Now, most games have smoke. I think if this character has invisibility, I think smoke is a great follow-up. Invisibility is very high impact. Smoke is a lower impact in general, right? You drop a smoke and then you walk away from it. You lose the value of it if somebody sees you somewhere else. However, having smoke break line of sight feeds into the same kind of skirmisher role that we're talking about with the invis here, and you can give it higher uptime and more offensive uses as well, as you can throw it on top of a team versus throwing it on top of you, which very drastically changes the setup of how you're using it. So I think most games have smoke of some kind. I don't think it's a crazy thing to have to explain to you, but I think this character will specialize in smoke as well as that invisibility. The third ability set that I would give this character is a silence. Now, I don't think every game needs a silence, and some games absolutely feel ruined when you're silenced. So I don't know if 100% this will be in there, but depending on what your focus is on abilities, it could definitely make its way in. If abilities aren't crazy strong, if these setups of like invis have a 2-minute cooldown between use for a 10-second duration, it's not going to be crazy. If you're silenced, you're not going to feel too bad about it. But in the case where abilities are strong and you can turn invisible every 30 seconds for 20 seconds, being able to silence somebody could be a game changer. So I think it is a relevant skill set to have as an option. And a character that has invis and is flanking and is a bounty hunter kind of character or assassin, I think a silence fits very thematically with that. So again, Night Stalkers in Destiny have this with suppression. Now, if they're not as good at it as Titans in Destiny, but in general, the Void subclass has suppression effects tied to suppression grenades, and their tether will also suppress enemies and delete their double jump, their class abilities, their grenades, their supers. Void Hunters are very anti-abilities, so I think it would make sense to bring that in when this fantasy so closely aligns to that. As well as rogues in Dark and Darker have a cutthroat ability that will, when you hit a spellcaster with it, disable them from casting spells for 3 seconds, which in Dark and Darker, totally lethal. 3-second silence is crazy. Game to game, it depends. Revenant and Apex had a longer duration than that. I've heard they got rid of visibility to silence. I think silencing in Apex is more high value than silencing in Dark and Darker, to give you that kind of context of it can be stronger or weaker depending on the game. Apex had a silence with Revenant, and then got rid of it and gave him a leap and to make him more aggressive and stuff. But I think having a silence ability on Revenant was a very powerful thing when used correctly. Sometimes you could just launch it at people and it kind of sucked. But if you knew how to play the game and you knew how to take a fight with that character, silencing somebody else was almost a surefire way to delete them. Now, this character is also on the high ground. They're looking down at somebody else. So I feel like they should have some kind of mobility. And we don't know what mobility is going to look like in this game, but if any character archetype is going to have a higher mobility than other character archetypes, stealth characters are generally going to be those characters that can take the high ground faster, if not more efficiently or at all, right? So for this kind of stealth character with invis, smoke, silences, I would say maybe a double jump. Very simple, very effective, much easier to balance around than some other mobility options like a grappling hook or something like that. So obviously if you make a double jump wall and you can make it just high enough that they can double jump up to it and that's it. If you make it slightly too high, you'll never be able to double jump to it, and that's the end of the story. It's a decent mobility tool. It can confuse people, especially if you're invisible while doing this. It can throw people off, right? So it gives you this jerky movement that might give this kind of character an edge to stay alive. Now, alternatively, this invisibility feature maybe is more of a phasing feature. I wouldn't say they're going to get both of these. I would say it's one or the other. Where invisibility is you're hard to see, but you're vulnerable to damage, right? You walk through a grenade, you get shot, you die, take the damage, whatever it is. Whereas phasing is more like Wraith from Apex, or a Warlock in Dark and Darker who can use Phantomize to turn into an ethereal kind of form, where you are visible still, but you're visibly not on the same plane of existence, so you don't take damage from those things. I believe Wraith, you can't see your enemies while you're in this form, so it kind of makes it harder for you to position, but if you have a plan and you have an idea of where to go, you can do that, but they can kind of keep track of where you're going because you leave a streak behind. So it's a bit more balanced, I would say, than Invis in terms of being less confusing, but of course Invis doesn't make you invincible, and phasing does, and that's kind of a get out of the jail free card. So it's a give or take of what it might be. This feels more like invisibility to me from looking at it, but I wanted to throw it out there. And the last thing I have on here that I want to really talk about for stealth and kind of, give an overview to is what I call the chase mechanic. It's named after Chase on Ranger and Dark and Darker, just because I was looking at Dark and Darker as this primary influence when I was reading these. When I was looking at these images, it was kind of the first thing that came up was Dark and Darker, Rogue, and Ranger. But the Ranger has a move or a passive called Chase. It is similar to Tracker in older COD games. I don't know if it's still in the newer one, but I know it was in some of the older ones. Or if you think of Bloodhound from Apex, his passive ability to see footprints of enemies in the past. Like they've been through 30 seconds ago, you can see where they were going. Bloodhound can also see, where people slid, where people open doors, things like that. I don't think anything that detailed in an extraction shooter, but being able to see footprints like the Ranger can in Dark and Darker, even if it's maybe they only last for 30 seconds and you have to be right on top of them to see them, that is still a very powerful information tool. And it would feed into this character's idea of being an assassin or bounty hunter and tracking people down, right? The tracker skill set is a part of that fantasy. So I think that could be something that they might be able to do. I think it fits a bit more with stealth than Thief, even though Thief has these visors that would probably give them some kind of overlay. I don't think it would be prerogative for Thief to chase people down as much as it might be for stealth. Thief, on the other hand, like I said, I feel is more going to be sound-based or utilitarian, and I see them more as a techie than an assassin. The visors, the big armor that looks like there's stuff like either inside of it or it's just very high tech doing something important, gives me the impression of them using tools. So looking at this image, the back right arm that's like holding the trigger has these big pads where like you can see a hollow break where the elbow would be, where maybe there's just stuff in there. They could fit smoke bombs in there as well. But these forearm pieces are like divoted in, and I don't know why you would have divoted gauntlets on such a big. I mean, you can already see she has a gauntlet, and there's just like an overlay on that, which made me kind of think of this whole dampening thing, where this might be a big suit, but it could be a very big suit designed to dampen the user's sound. I don't know how crazy that is. If people didn't theorize about a kind of stealth unit, that might be something that would be the case, right? Where they have this dampening system to suppress their sound, and that would be pretty cool, pretty high tech. But continuing from there and going on to the next couple steps, the first thing that I thought of when they said thief, and this is something that I am totally pulling out of left field, and I don't know if it would work in every game, but I love the rogue in Dark and Darker has the ability to pickpocket people. Straight up thief attitude. You can, if you're invisible, you don't have to be invisible, but it's easier when you're invisible, right? You can walk up to somebody and hold interact on them to just take a random item out of their inventory, and then you can keep doing that as long as they don't kill you. You just keep looting them. Really funny shenanigans of people waiting around corners and turning invis and doing this kind of stuff. I think it'd be really funny to have that in this game. Great little role-playing thing, if nothing else, to just be able to steal stuff out of people's pockets. And if you're silent, that makes it a lot easier to get in close to pickpocket somebody, right? That's kind of where this whole image came together for Thief for me, with high-tech suit, pickpocketing people. I'm like, well, if you're going to get in close, it makes sense to have these silent footsteps, kind of like Dead Silence in COD, or maybe you could have this quieter crouch footsteps and then have faster crouch speed, like something like Revenant or old Void Hunters used to have, just to help you get in without being seen. I guess, without being heard, but the idea of not being heard, people don't turn around to look at you. Now, I think this character deserves to have higher mobility than Stealth does. Why is that? Stealth has invisibility, which, like we said, much higher impact off rip than anything I could give Thief off rip, based off this image. So, giving them a really high mobility skill would allow them to be more fluid in crossing the map and getting in and out of engagements without the use of invisibility. With some silent, movement or quieter movement, it can help you get in to engage and out to disengage, as well as just lurking. It could be pretty nice for like a newer player to move in these cold zones where people aren't really moving a lot. It can give you an advantage there just to, get in, get out, do some questing. So, of high mobility things, what would I give a Thief? The first thing you would probably think of might be a grappling hook or, a rope dart, something like that. Really strong ability. I don't think it would really fit in extraction shooter. I think it's too fast, probably too loud. And generally, I just wouldn't think it's super fun to watch somebody grapple away like Spider-Man or Pathfinder. However, what I could be totally sold on is wall climbing. Now, the degree and the height at which you can wall climb up in the air, I think, if anything, wall climbing on Thief should be a higher height than double jumping on Stealth. Just because in combination with being able to double jump with high mobility, making those jerky movements, turning invisible, I think Thief should have the advantage in terms of total height that she can get. It will get you out of sight of people walking in where, they can't hear you climb up, so they're not looking up, and that can give you an advantage until people learn to look up. Or if they don't look up, you can get in, and if you have silent falling as well as silent moving, drop off of a high ground to pickpocket somebody or get a stealth kill of some kind, whatever. But in terms of interesting concepts, I think, Revenant's wall climbing ability, Genji's ability to wall climb, gives this kind of verticality that this character would sorely lack. Characters like Loba, which I think, Thief could be based on, or even just the Thief games, they have a lot of verticality. So I feel like it's imperative for this character to have that. Now, they could also have a sort of tumble dodge mechanic. This is one that I don't think we might see, but Hunter dodge in Destiny, you can do it, pretty quickly. It's not like crazy effective. It's really good on controllers, but like if you're fighting mouse and keyboard, most people can kind of keep on track of that. But the movement could be useful maybe against PvE enemies or just to get around corners as a little burst of speed. Having a tumble, I think, would fit in with this character. If we're giving them a high mobility, why not? Now, I think their main focus and their main skill set, is going to be utility. And there's a lot of ways you could take utility. I'm taking it in terms of having skills that don't directly, do damage. They're not a grenade. They're not a immediate value invisibility. They're not a shield. They're not directly combat applicable, but they can be, useful in giving you an edge in the fight. Things like traps, barbed wire, bear traps, tripwires for bouncing betties, claymores, things like lock picking faster, things like field rations, which is a skill that rangers have in Dark and Darker that lets you just have your own heal. Decoys, like in Hunt, where you can throw blank fire decoys that when they hit the ground, they make a gunfire shot. Pretty useful. Fakes, like fake dynamite in Hunt. You throw fake dynamite at people. Doesn't do damage, but man, will it make them run, Or alternatively, if you're thinking Apex, one of the utility things that I think is super cool that I think some people just don't think about very often, Wraith's Whispers, where she hears, whispers from the void of somebody's aiming at us, somebody's coming near us, things like that, giving you warnings. Super cool utility. Alternatively, utility could be something like having better stacking or better inventory space. Now, this could just straight up be extra inventory slots. What would a thief want more than more loot? Or it could be your ability to stack items is better. So say you can normally carry 4 bandages in a slot, but a thief could carry double that. Or something like in Hunt, we used to have 3 slots for bringing a knife, meds, and a tool, and you had a perk to get an extra one. Now it gives you 1 extra use. So a thief might be the prime character to get extra uses out of items. So things like that, while they won't be directly useful in a fight, if with some setup or some prep or some, covering your own tracks as you run away from somebody, dropping something like caltrops or another trap that slows people down might give you an edge. Or if you trap somebody in caltrops, if it debuffs their move speed, if you put them around a corner and somebody sprints straight into it, now you have a better chance of jumping them. So that seems to be the kind of thing that I'm giving this character. If that's what they're not going for, I get it. But it is the vibe I get of stealth being higher impact for immediate value, but being a higher skill ceiling kind of character where you can do all these tricky plays, but they're obviously much harder to pull off because you have to plan it ahead of time or you have to react very quickly kind of thing. And finally, I already touched on it a little bit with that visor. I would love to see some kind of loot vision on her. I don't think we want anything like enemy highlighting or stuff like that. That seems kind of crazy. Totally broken if it's not generally highly visible anyways. However, giving you loot vision where you can see maybe loot of a certain value and above through walls would be kind of cool. Even if it's like, 10, 20 feet, that would get you loot pretty fast and would feel kind of unique as a passive. Or alternatively, there are characters in Apex that can see death boxes. So even maybe giving you walls on somebody that you downed, so you can see once you knock them down where they're crawling. Once they get up, you'll see they're not down anymore, and give you kind of information on that without directly giving you wall hacks and other characters. It does push your advantage further, but it doesn't directly give you an advantage in a neutral fight, right? I think that's fine as something. So I'd love to see just that visor get used in some way. So if you can't tell, I think the Rogue and Rager in Dark and Darker are very big inspirations on myself for this, just because Dark and Darker has pushed so many of these really powerful abilities and a class-based system being based off of D&D in extraction shooters to the forefront. And I do really appreciate that as someone who plays D&D. I think it's really cool that someone's attempting to do that. And it's a very complicated game. It's very different from where I expect Marathon to be because it's mostly sword and shield kind of game. Very technical, very lethal, very slow. I expect Marathon to be very different than that. But as a base premise, just the concept of having a pickpocket in an extraction shooter, it gave me a lot of insight that after staring at these images for way too long, put me on a track to get where I am now with this video. So as I said, the Rogue and the Ranger gave me a lot of inspiration looking at these images for what they might be able to do. I pulled a lot from there and the concepts they went with. So I would really recommend taking a peek at that, even if you're just looking at the wiki. It's a great source of ideas of how stealth can be done in an extraction shooter. with abilities. Obviously, you can be stealthy in Tarkov and hunt, but it's very different. So I think that's a great place to look for anybody who doesn't have experience with class-based gameplay, but is interested, or especially is interested in class-based extraction shooters. I don't know any others that really do it, honestly. I mean, Marathon's going to be obviously a big one. Dark and Darker is, I think, the only one that I've played personally that does this. There's not many class-based games, honestly, out right now. So just in general, if you're a fan of D&D, fan of class-based things, fan of extraction shooters, melee combats, something like that, Dark and Darker, I can highly recommend it. But just looking at the Rogue and Ranger and what their skills and passives are, can give you a general idea of how I came to where I got here. I would love to talk to you guys about it. I feel like it would really bloat this video. If you want me to do a deep dive into just Rogue and Ranger and Dark and Darker and kind of give you my deep insight on that, let me know. I'll totally do it. So just to wrap up, these characters are in the same camp in terms of being stealthy, disruptors, however you want to put their archetype. I know one's called stealth, and it bothers me so much because I want to call them stealth characters, but one is the stealth character. So you're going to have to forgive me for saying it probably a couple times in this video. But, these both live in the same archetype as roguish archetypes. And in that case, I think they come at it from two very different angles in terms of this art. And I really want to believe that they gave us art with a meaning. So this is my interpretation of these art pieces and what it could mean for these characters and for these runners. I could totally be wrong. I would love to hear your ideas. If me saying any of this has given you any inspiration, I would love to discuss it and see what you guys think. The visor might be, what their mag holsters might have in them. We're obviously a bit of a ways out. That we are supposed to have more gameplay tests this year, and they are supposed to maybe have some betas or alphas or pre-alphas, pre-betas for people to participate in. I would love to hear more about that. I think it'd be hard not to get gameplay this year. I think it's about that time. So it's honestly getting exciting for me. I have been so busy the last couple of months getting into new job stuff and new duties and things like that I have been diving into new things, personally, like Warhammer and Total War strategy games, and being distracted in general from extraction shooters. And getting into Tarkov and the last wipe, the last 2 weeks, has been a lot of fun. Playing a little bit of Destiny again, which has been great, and it really drove me to thinking more about Marathon again, and I really am looking forward to this game, and I want to enjoy it with all of you once it comes out. However, in that meantime, I want to work on things that I will also enjoy. I don't want to put out drivel that I don't think is interesting, because I don't expect you to think something's interesting if I don't think it's interesting. So this has been really fun for me to do this. I have done this literally in one sitting, this whole thing, and planning and writing and recording. So I've had a lot to think of for this, and I really did forget that we had this come out. I was waiting for more things personally, and time slipped away. But I want to do really marathon focused stuff, and I am much more of a numbers and dark and gritty kind of guy in terms of what I want to do content on. I don't really find much joy in comparing a lot of Tarkov stuff to this. If I'm going to deep dive into Tarkov, why would I not just make a Tarkov channel? I don't really want to dive really, really, really deep into those other games. I did it kind of for the intro to extraction shooters, because I think having that baseline is good for people. But I really want to focus on Marathon and digging into news and information and content like this and theory crafting. But it's just, we're not getting a lot of news. So it's been a little slow for me to come around to something that excited me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like, subscribe for more stuff down the line. I really do apologize for taking so long to get here. But I hope you enjoy it. I have had a lot of fun thinking of and writing this, and absolutely erasing everything on my whiteboard and putting up a huge list of things that I've just jotted together here. I didn't even write a script for most of this. This is just off the cuff. So it's been fun for me. That is all for now, runners. Remember, in the heavens, they are waiting.